The year in review and a look ahead to 2015 this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. Often end-of-the-year reflection is as much anticipation of the new year as it is consideration of the past. But 2014 strikes me as a year we'd best remember. Events of the past year feel more than usual like important indicators of who we are rather than a series of events that simply happened. And for purposes of this show, we define who we are as citizens of Dane County, of Wisconsin, of the United States, and of the world. Joining the panel, two people who I know have thought about all of this: columnist, social entrepreneur, and founder of One City Learning Center, Colleen Kerr, and Wisconsin State Journal editorial page editor, Scott Milford. Thank you both.
Thank you
very much for coming on. All right, so this is a half an hour where we just kind of roam hither and yon. But I want to start by 2014 marked 40 years that I've lived in Madison. I moved here in '74. And 40 years ago, the idea that you could walk into a grocery store or a store in Colorado or Washington, buy some pot, take it home and smoke it, that gay marriage would be accepted in this country the way that it is is mind-blowing to me. And it's sort of the indicator of this vast period of time. And yet, on a much more serious note, race relations today compared to 1974 all of a sudden don't seem any different. So I'm kind of thinking of it, Scott, as this year where we learn something about ourselves. What we do with it remains to be seen.
Yeah, and they kind of go different ways. I mean, the gay marriage issue showed how fast things can change, and it showed how people can come together. And in politics, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like it's going the other way. And we've always thought of Wisconsin politically as a purple state, and it was only 6 years ago we were all blue. Now we've been pretty solid red for 4 years, and it doesn't seem to be changing. And then you look at the race issue, and Obama got elected. It was, you know, this post-racial almost age was the rhetoric. I don't think people thought we were going to get to it then, but it was there. And now, particularly with the shootings, with continued struggles with the schools, the numbers are improving, I think, in Madison when it comes to things like the achievement gap, but not real fast.
That's right.
And Kaleem's charter school got shot down, and I don't feel like there's been one big thing, like action to rally around, like that sort of provided. I think the new school superintendent coming to town provided some of that. Now some of that, I think she's still doing a good job. Some of that buzz is worn off, and so it seems like there's some positives and some negatives there in terms of who we are and whether we can get along and get things done.
Let's talk about race for a few minutes, can we? Because the year started with the Race to Equity report.
Yeah.
And at the time, it seemed like a significant challenge to address the issues of school achievement, employment, and incarceration. Well, within months, and by now, it's become a much bigger discussion, I think, than I thought it was going to become, Colleen.
I think people were shocked by the confirmation of the conversation that people were hearing play out in the press about these disparities, these issues, but there weren't numbers. There weren't the data put behind it in a way that people could really understand it, grasp it, rally around it. So I think that the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families did an excellent job at putting that out there. But then I think the shock was so huge for people that they didn't know what to do. And because proposals like Madison Prep and things that were proposals that people might disagree with, but they were tangible solutions to a specific outcome, there weren't those real solutions there that we could immediately rally behind. So I think that people got a little lost, people got a little scattered. There's been a lot of good activity that's come out of that, more of a greater focus on getting people into jobs on the part of the United Way, the Urban League, and you have Centro Hispano groups like that. You have the Justified Anger Initiative with Pastor Alex G's Nehemiah Community Development Corporation, and so there's more work going on now as a result of that. But I do think that we're still trying to figure our way out about what do we do to help address these issues.
And I mean, there was beginning to be at least a sense of momentum, and then Ferguson, and then New York, and then it seems to me that has really changed the whole complexity of this conversation.
You know what? Some people think that there are those conspiracy theorists that think that, here we are, we're starting to develop some momentum, not just here but in other places around the country, addressing some of these hardcore issues. Then all of a sudden, this flashpoint issue comes up with Michael Brown and Eric Garner, and the activism on our young people, I think, is great. They should be doing that. They should be out there saying, this is the country that we want, and articulating a vision for what they want for their future. But I think that we got caught up in the media storm of it, the community. This shows how fractured our communities are still, that we can't have a conversation about those two incidents without having major disagreements. And so I think some people have retreated. And we got to start all over again, going forward. But I still think that we've made considerably more progress than even with those incidents taking place.
Well, and it had been, to me, the schools were more the rallying point, and people like the schools, and people want to agree on the schools, and they want to make the schools better. And now, especially since Ferguson, it's become more of this police issue. And the police issue is just more, I think, naturally confrontational, even though I think our police department here is very professional. I just think that's thrown kind of a hook into some of the progress that Madison was making. On the other hand, it's added more attention to it.
Well, and to the extent that the focus on police was actually, could have been a focus on the criminal justice system, writ large, incarceration policies, legislation that was passed, arrests separate from just violence-related arrests. That seemed like it might have some benefit. But now we're in this place where it's anti-cop, rather than what do we need to systemically change in the criminal justice system?
Yeah, I think then there's two different issues. There's a security issue when you're dealing with the issue of the police. There's an opportunity issue with all these other challenges that we have with young people not getting a good education or not getting the benefit of an education that's provided to them, the lack of job opportunities for people. So those things are getting mixed up with one another, but the challenge on the police side of it is it's a broader criminal justice issue. It's not about individual cops, right? There are people who will be hired into police departments to be cops on the street who probably shouldn't be hired. I look at Ferguson as, 64% black population, 94% white police force. There's a broader systemic challenge there that needs to be addressed around opportunity and access that we've got to focus on in order to fix the policing problem. So what I hope happens, or hope doesn't happen, is what's happened this year, is we get lost in the minutia of the emotion of seeing these young men being killed in front of us, and another one, we don't know exactly what happened, but laying out in the street for hours. And now those type of things will heighten people's emotions, and we'll get lost in it. But that's not those aren't the long-term challenges that we have to deal with.
When we come back, we're going to talk about red and blue Wisconsin right after this. My guests are familiar panelists on this show, Kaleem Kerr and Scott Milford, and we're talking about the year in review and looking ahead to 2015 a little bit. And Scott, we talked about this right off the top. And it ties in, I think, to the race issue to some degree. But the elections of 14, very contentious elections again, and there was a lot of talk about a divided state. And the thing that I didn't realize that, and I guess I've wondered about it for a while. There was a piece in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, I think, in the last couple of weeks, on a divided Wisconsin that showed that not only are communities getting more divided, but people are choosing to live more with people like them. That strikes me as really worrisome.
I agree, but I think you see it. I mean, when in presidential races, I live on the east side, and it's all Democratic signs. Pretty much everybody leans left. And when I go out, I have lots of relatives all over Wisconsin, and occasionally it's just a bit of a shock where you drive to a different part of a state and it is the exact opposite, and it seems to be becoming more and more that way. Like I think the Craig Gilbert article you're talking about showed that that is indeed happening, that there's some self-selection to that, and I think that is worrisome because if you're not around people who aren't like you, and I guess in this context we're talking about what your politics are, it becomes, the cliche echo chamber. You're only reinforcing what you think, and you're maybe not learning more about the other side.
People have overly personalized politics, too. That's part of the challenge. Is that I've experienced this where people ask, wonder, what are your politics really? Are you on our side or are you on the other side?
Right.
And if you're not on the side with them, you can forget about forget going out to lunch, forget having a handshake, forget getting any support from that person. They will literally just not deal with you. And that's not germane to Democrats or Republicans. It exists on both sides, and it is thick in the air. And I think it's keeping us away from really manifesting real opportunities to grow our city, grow our community. Madison struggles with, it really is on an island. The majority of our folks here, I think 68% are registered Democrats. The conservatives here, you don't necessarily know who they are, but they exist. But you're here, and it's so heavily bent that way, and everything is seen through that lens. But once you step outside of Dane County, it's totally different. And it's like, how do you have a conversation when you're the capital of Wisconsin with the rest of Wisconsin, when you're so heavily one way in the state, rest of the state primarily is heavily another? Makes it challenging.
Well, the other thing you have to mention is Act 10, which I think heightened a lot of this. And with the re-election of Governor Walker, not the recall, but the most recent one, I think Act 10, I think that was, okay, we're past that issue. That was an incredibly divisive issue. We're past that. So now we're going to get beyond some of that personal stuff that you're talking. We're all Wisconsinites. But unfortunately, this right to work is coming up. Walker at least says he doesn't want to go there. And I think that probably is going to come up, and unfortunately it will be another echo of that divisiveness when I thought we were kind of getting over it.
I agree, but it's not just right to work. It's Common Core, and it's whether the GAB survives, and it's a whole variety of issues that seem to be coming up, I think, because of the way the state is redistricted. And say, the way communities are drawn up now, and I don't know how we move forward, how we get back to this talk of common good.
Well, Common Core, I think, has been a little bit exaggerated. When Walker is not using the repeal word anymore.
Right.
I think that was more of an election issue. For some reason, he felt like he had to use the repeal word. When you talk to them, they're actually talking about, well, we'll just get some more input, and I don't think it's going to change that much. So where do we pull together? I mean, Robin Voss was just in talking to us. We had an editorial Sunday about it, but he really seems serious about corrections reform.
I agree.
He had some inmates working at his factory. He was really impressed. He hired, I think, 3 of them on permanently. Paul Ryan has talked about that to some degree. So maybe there are some possibilities here for issues where we can work with, but then you get something like, drug testing, food stamps. Again, another issue where I'm not so sure it's all that consequential one way or the other, but it becomes this the debate and we don't get to some of the more important consequential things.
For a long time, conservatives, too, have been on the outside, screaming to get in and have been highlighting the things that they don't like, the things that they dislike. I think that over the last 4 years, they've been in power. They've had both houses in our state legislature. I think they've had a hard time peeling away from, whoa, we've got all this now. What do we do to get what we wanted all these years to now? We actually, when we're governing, we actually have to think about how we empower everyone. And so that you have that group that feels totally disempowered, you're going to have that constant source of tension, and eventually it's going to prevent you from getting what you want as well. I think they're now starting to discover that we have to actually govern more from the center, I'll say that, than we have been from the extremes. And if they don't do that, then we end up continuing on the course that we feel and have been talking about, which is this polarization and this tension.
The Corrections Department and the administration has also been talking about solitary confinement and rethinking policies there, all of which I think has the potential to influence disparities in the criminal justice system. That might not be what they're thinking about from the outset, but that could be one of the results of it, which would be, I think, very, very positive.
Well, and you mentioned marijuana at the outset. By the way, I remember when Ben Maisel would march a whole crowd up onto the square and smoke marijuana openly, so I'm not sure we've changed that much, but that is this, a continuation of rethinking about drug penalties and decriminalization, and it hasn't come here yet to Wisconsin, but it seems like it's on its way.
All right, we're going to enter the lightning round when we come back right after this. I'm back with Kaleem Kerr and Scott Milford, and we are talking about 2014. I just jotted on a couple of local stories just because they're kind of fresh in my mind, sort of the ongoing conversation about Judge Doyle Square. I think that's a big deal. East Washington Avenue is just exploding. I mean, it's just really, it's physically changing now. I think 15, it's going to change even more. That's really exciting. Joe Parisi's had to wrestle with this 911 stuff that's been going on. What am I missing here, other than the obvious? But are there stories like that popped out in 14 that you think are going to be important in 15?
Well, you touched on the good government issue. I mean, it's not just the GAB. The whole campaign financing system. We had Brad Schimmelin, the Attorney General-elect, and he said, which I think is right, is you pretty much need a team of attorneys now, given all the John Doe cases and lawsuits back and forth. I mean, what are the rules for spending money on politics? And then are they going to redo the John Doe stuff? What are they going to do, if anything, about disclosure? And again, the GAB. So I think, and that's not even mentioning our redistricting issue. But I think good government issues are going to be big, and you get this ping pong effect each election where it seems like the Democrats do better in the presidential year and the Republicans do better on the gubernatorial year, and I think sometimes that puts more pressure on the partisan side in power to get something big done now, get whatever we want done now, and then move on.
Not that having an opportunity is always necessary for an editorial writer, but you do see 15 as you're going to talk about that, about good government stuff.
Definitely at the Wisconsin State Journal, we're going to be highlighting good government issues. And I'm not so sure that, like I say, I think something has to be done with campaign finance just so people understand it. Maybe the John Doe thing has gone too far, and maybe it needs to be pulled back. But I don't want to pull back too far. And then an independent, neutral GAB, I think, is essential, and I'm really worried about that one.
Kaleem, you know local issues as well as anybody.
Yeah, I think there's going to be I think the growth is already starting in the confluence of the need for greater diversity in our workforce, from young people to, seniors to people of color. That's really starting to take root. The Madison Region Economic Partnership has been sending out these surveys to local businesses. First time we'll be able to begin to get a baseline for how hiring practices are operating in businesses.
Businesses say they're going to hire.
They're going to hire,
right?
and we're starting to see that. I mean, you go to some of these construction sites 4 years ago, I would walk up to these places and ask these foremen on these jobs, why are you guys hiring any people of color. These are skills that we actually have, to now where you drive by and you're starting to see more of us out there. So that's a beautiful thing. But that, combined with some of the growth in technology and the innovation sector here, the growth of Epic, they're starting to grow internationally. They're going to continue to bring more young people here to work in these jobs. They're going to continue to move into these places all over our city. Some of the spin-off companies that we're seeing created through Generator and Sector 67 and 100 State, groups like that. It's going to be a different, new, vibrant growth in Madison from all different vantage points. And I think that the growth of opportunity is going to create more opportunities for jobs and employment for those that haven't traditionally had it.
And the mayoral race is really going to spotlight a lot of those
That's
issues,
right.
not just the race issue and not just the economy, but you mentioned the downtown. It's
Yep.
not just development, and versus historic preservation. It's also, some people are concerned about gentrification, some people are concerned about noise, the mayor's worried about, I can't remember what his catchphrase was, saloon, mega saloon.
On State Street.
Mega saloons. So I think that mayoral race will really be a highlight, be really focus us on a lot of those issues.
And I think
what
people-
Madison is going to be.
Yeah.
And I hope people see this race, because we're going to start to hear about it more. But this particular race this year, these folks will have 4 years to really begin to redefine Madison at a period when we're now starting to generate some significant momentum in all of these areas. Where will each of these leaders who are running for office be, and where will they take us with the momentum that's already been generated? That's going to be exciting. So I hope that people see that in the midst of the conversation that's going to take place as these candidates tell us
And
why
it's
we select them.
generational too. I mean, you've got Paul Soglin and then two not very young, but much younger candidates around the age when he was elected.
So it reminds you of Bill Dyke and Paul Soglin?
Yeah, and then you have all of these young Epic newbies downtown, changing downtown, versus the people like us who've been in Madison for a long time. And I don't mean versus that way, but it's changing.
All right, final thought. AP poll, almost one half think that 15 is going to be better than 14. Hasn't been that high in a long time, so we're going to end on that. Thank you both very much for joining me. We're going to come back and wrap up For the Record just a second.
I agree with that.
My thanks to Kaleem and to Scott and to you. We'll see you next Sunday on For the Record.